evening, everyone. Can you hear me? I can't hear myself. A little louder.
It's all right, don't worry. Don't worry, I'm just laughing. Are we done? Is yours on?
I think it is on now. We're going to get started with our general fund budget workshop today. It's scheduled for 6:15. We're a few minutes past for Thursday, the 26th of April, here at the Del Rio Community Center. I want to thank you all for attending and participating in our budget workshop. And I would like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If our Mayor Pro Tem can join us and lead us in that, please.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. And I'm going to turn to our city manager to make the introduction of tonight's budget workshop. I think the mics are hot a little bit. Let's see.
I don't know if you'd like to do some sound adjustments for a moment. Welcome, Mayor Nava and members of the public. Tonight's meeting is intended to be a workshop on the state of our general fund. What we hope to do is present a set of parameters for moving forward and receive some feedback from the council. So we'll begin with a set of comments that I'll share, and then I'll turn over to department heads to run through some of the proposed changes, which are staff recommendation at this point. So tonight's intention is to provide a best estimate for where the general fund stands from a revenue point of view, and also get a preview and share some thoughts on our recommendations for a balanced budget. You're going to see a lot of changes proposed in the budget. The hope is that we can adequately explain to the council and the public what service level changes that could come with the proposed reductions. We're looking for direction from our governing body and hoping to receive that, as well as answer any questions or address comments from members of the public who are present. So what we've done is work to prepare a set of revenue projections. And in the upcoming fiscal year, we're anticipating revenues at approximately $13.1 million into the general fund. And you can tell by looking at how this pie is divided that we receive significant funds from our sales tax, our property tax, our utility user tax, as well as our vehicle license fees and a number of interfund transfers. So when we compare last year's budget to this year's budget, we're taking a pretty modest view. We are anticipating the increase in revenue of approximately $270,000 for the year. What this presents is a snapshot of the kind of big picture by departments, what the proposed budget is by general fund. And you're going to hear many of our comments today focused primarily on the delivery of services through departments. So you'll see from looking through this table that we have historically and also in the coming year had certain expressed priorities for the general fund. And that percentage that's on the third column is intended to display what portion of the general fund a particular department represents. So from an expenditure point of view, we have gone through a process to do what we can to reduce our expenditures and live within the projected revenues of the general fund. And this is in light of the many conversations we've had over the last 6 months about our operational deficit. So what you'll see in the proposed set of expenditures is a decrease of approximately $740,000. As we go through the individual departments, you're going to see there are places where we increase spending from the last fiscal year to reflect actual costs, as well as decreased expenses where staff found that we could maintain the highest level of service in an environment with constrained revenues. So before our department heads pursued this discussion at the department level, I presented them with a number of assumptions. And so if any of these assumptions are off, it'd be really helpful to hear from council how we should redirect our focus. The end goal was for us to present a general fund budget that was balanced with expenditures matching revenues. This is a very rough cut. We're not exactly there. We're still short. But this does intend to lay a course out that we're hoping we can get your support to pursue or receive feedback on how to redirect. We have taken the tact of freezing a number of vacant positions, so minimizing the number of layoffs so that we can take advantage of positions that have already been left vacant. Specific direction has been provided regarding consolidating administrative support where possible, and specifically in the area of the Planning, Building, and Community Development Department. So sharing resources rather than having department-based resources. The staff was asked to go through their budgets and actually attempt to achieve a 5% general fund reduction. So trying to cut their budgets by 5% as a first rough estimate of a target. I also directed staff to do a minimal adjustment to our call paid firefighter expense, and this was as a result, some of you may be aware, but the way we pay call paid firefighters is we pay one rate for the first hour, which is $10 an hour, and $8 per hour for each subsequent hour. And this creates some real administrative burdens and also makes firefighters lower paid than any other group of folks working for the city. So the intention was to normalize the rate so a single rate is paid. And you'll see in the fire department's outlook what impact that had on their proposed budget. It was also directed to department heads that the redevelopment agency reductions that occurred, that those remain in place. So unfortunately, we had 4 layoffs in March, and we will assume those will be vacant and remaining reductions. And then we froze the opportunity to hire a permanent fire chief and the fire marshal position that the acting fire marshal or the acting fire chief once occupied, and attempted to gain some savings there as well. We also, from a general fund point of view, zeroed out all capital budgets for the general fund. And you're going to see in the content of the presentation a little later the specific capital projects that have been prioritized and brought forward. But the budget as it currently stands has no capital projects to be funded by the general fund without your guidance. So the first, what we're going to do is run through a number of slides, and they're intended to be illustrative. They're very rough cuts of reductions and increases. So in the city manager's individual budget, we have reductions in travel, training, and membership dues. And then we had the impact to the general fund of the city manager staffing and cost associated with that. No longer is it offset by the RDA, it's now entirely absorbed by the general fund. And you'll see as we go through a number of departments that the impact and loss of RDA funds really has changed some of the resources that the general fund is required to cover unless we have additional reductions. So overall, when you look at the city manager's budget, while you'd hope that it'd go down, unfortunately, it has gone up by approximately $74,000. And unfortunately, our city clerk was not able to join us this evening, but I am prepared to provide a brief recap of her reductions as well in her department. So Alma oversees both elections and the city clerk's office. Before the end of last year, we did lay off an administrative receptionist position, and it's assumed that that position will remain vacant. We also had an opportunity to zero out election costs because there is not an election in which the city has expenses planned. We zeroed out a number of items. They may be small, but they're intended to show that where we can cut, we're trying everywhere we can to save funds. And we've also reduced our supply and travel budgets. So altogether, the changes from last year to this year represent approximately $13,400. Okay, and with that, we're going to begin with presentations from individual departments, and we'll first have Francisco Soto.
Mr. Mayor and council members, good evening. Francisco Soto, building official. As you can see, there are decreases shown in this, and one of the largest increases, of course, was that we lost the RDA funding, and so a portion of the employee compensation likewise went down. Some of these positions were shared with the RDA. The other are routine items that are normally found in the budgets, and you can see that they were reduced. Some of them are around 50%. Others remain the same because of minimum operating requirements. The total decreases to the department end up being around 11,676. The increases that you see here are in order to make up the salaries of the remaining RDA members. The department originally started this funding year with 7 positions. It is down to 5 positions. So you can see that some of that compensation had to be made up into the general fund that was being borne by the RDA. If you have a question regarding the technical services on community development, normally we have a couple of consultants who have to do annual reports on home grants that are active or planning items. That usually ranges somewhere between $1,800 to $3,000. So the community development technical budget went from 0 to 6. That was usually borne by the RDA before. The most challenging thing that we're going to face into this budget year is the consolidation that is proposed, where the community development services will now do the administrative and clerical duties assigned to the administrative secretary for the planning department. And so compared to this fiscal year, we will try to do 8 jobs with 5 people, and I look at that as the most challenging.
Not at this time. Not yet so far.
Thank you, Francisco.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, and public. Shirley Bonillas, Personnel and Risk Management Administrator. As you can see by this slide, we lost the secretarial position back on January 1st. The department is functioning to the best of our ability and using interns as we can, and volunteers when appropriate, to kind of fill in that gap for major projects. The line items seen are decreased to just be minimally operating. Advertising and promotion is really overstated in this budget due to the use of the website and other free media, if you will, to promote our positions. Plus, going into next fiscal year, the only thing we're looking at really advertising will be the fire chief's position, utilizing CalJobs and utilizing our website and a network that we have created with the local colleges and training networks. As far as ergo, we'd like to see a little bit of money added into the budget for ergonomics. We have quite a few workstations that are not conducive to stopping the workers' comp bleed. So to kind of deter that, we would like to see some money built in there so we can get the worst case scenarios taken care of next year. Any questions? Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, City Council. As stated before, there's the freeze on the fire marshal's position, and 50% of that salary came from the general fund. And the cost savings of the interim chief, which is me, from Chief Contreras, his step level, to where I'm at, step 1 level, there's a cost savings is there as well. So that's where we come up with the $88,000. There was a slight reduction in the travel as well. The increase, of course, the Station 2 that just opened up, there's operational cost that associates with that station to be operational, and that's the $20,000 you see there. That's the utilities and the supplies and everything just for the building alone, just the function out of there. And the temporary salaries we had to increase as well, because what we had to do, we had to split our shifts, and we've had to bring up our call paid firefighters to give us a very minimal staffing level of 3 and 3 at each station. So to run those call paids at a 24-hour basis for the year cycle, we had to increase it at $94,000. Any questions? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Ruby Walla, Finance Director. As you see here on the slide, what this represents is some decreases and increases that we've made to our budget. We currently have a vacant accounting assistant position, and we have the vacancy of the 50% of the grants coordinator, which was laid off with RDA. In addition to salaries, you'll see that on the other side as an increase, we have temporary salaries. And at the moment, we have our vacant accounting assistant, the permanent position backfilled with a temporary for our utility billing department. And that's actually a split cost between finance and utility billing. We've made several decreases: technical services, office supplies, other operating supplies, small tools and minor equipment, repair and maintenance, travel, and training. These are all line item adjustments that we saw that were appropriate for the departments. The biggest one that we took was in small tools and minor equipment. A couple years back when we were going into the conversion of our new accounting system, that was due to the increases that in that line item. So we're looking at this point for next year, it's best recommendation to decrease that, as we've already converted to the system, and then we're in the works of just replacing any computers or anything that we need at the end, through the end of this fiscal year. The increases that you see there, professional services has a $5,000 increase. That has to do with an actuarial study that we're trying to do with CalPERS, for CalPERS, our rates, to review the side fund, to have a TOT audit done, and then accounting services for our year-end close, just to wrap up and clean up our audit process. Rent, that's an increase, and that has to do with our records document storage. Postage, that's just a line item increase with the billing. Postage costs have increased just for our billing, so that's a reflection of that. Merchant services, as you're well aware, that's new to us now that we're accepting credit cards. At the moment, it's $6,000. Again, not until we see the real impact and the trend, and as people begin using it more and more, we can see the true fiscal impact. And again, I explained the temporary salaries. If you have any questions. Mm-hmm.
The revenue outlook.
Okay.
The figures you have for 2012, 2013, how, I mean, it's awfully difficult to predict the future, but is that a conservative figure, or how did you come up with that dollar amount?
Actually, I went line item by line item. So in essence, there was decreases in some line items and increases in others. For example, utility user tax, there was an increase there. What I did was factor in whatever Prop 218 increases we have for water, wastewater that are upcoming, and just took an average, and then based our 4% off of that in what we're actually receiving now. So there was an increase there. Property tax, there was a slight decrease. Let me get the sheet. I have it for you.
And the reason I ask is because I know we're looking at making reductions, and so, and it's based on a proposed figure that we're going to be receiving, you know, and so that's the reason I'm asking that.
Right, and when we closed the books, when we did our audit for June 30th, 2011, we actually received more revenues than projected. But then again, we had one-time revenues that are being deposited that does impact the general fund. But the line items specific that we do get for property tax, VLF swap, those are items that I decreased based on where we're at now, based on where we were at last year, and how we based those projections for the current fiscal year. Other items, sales tax is actually, we slightly increased it by $120,000 in this projection. Franchise taxes were increased. Business license tax stayed the same. Other construction permits, that was through talk with Francisco Soto. We adjusted it accordingly to reflect what they would be expecting in revenue, and there was an increase there.
And the sales tax, going back to the sales tax, was that increase of $120,000, is that just based on?
What I took is the average monthly. I took the average, what we're receiving today, what we're expecting, just the average through the rest of the year. And then I based that, and then what I did is did a comparison from where we were at this time last year to where we are this year, and then I took the percentage difference there.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions?
Any other questions from council? No. No questions.
Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Before I start on the money part, I want to remind everybody, tomorrow night, our author is coming, Wet Desert. You will be able to, if you have a book, just get it signed. If not, you can purchase a book and have the author sign it, and he'll be there to talk about it.
Thank you.
Okay. The largest item that you can see on there for a reduction is to freeze a part-time page position. This is basically a person who is a shelver and back up to the circulation desk. We are also creating program changes. One of the things that we did before coming up with the numbers is at one of the library board meetings, they spent 2.5 hours going over each line item, what we do, what our projects are, what our most popular programs are, and made some decisions for changes and adjustments. So we will still have our summer reading program this summer, but we won't have a separate teenage program. Most of them are junior high students, and we're hoping to incorporate them into just the older kids that we work with. Our monthly story time program will be reduced to holidays, which saves us a lot of money in some of the smaller line items. We're also, at that meeting, decided to rely much more heavily on volunteers. So because we don't have a shelver as much as we would have, we're going to rely on volunteers to help clean the books and help us shelve the books versus having a paid person do that. We're also planning on getting a couple of people to help us phone people about having overdue books, which should hopefully cut our postage costs down. So there's very small minor adjustments to make the smaller items work that way. Also, for the book budget, we're going to supplement that so that we actually will have available to us the same amount of $38,000 by using some of our developer impact fees, which is an allowable use for those fees. So we were looking at what we can still do for the public and trying to keep it as best as we can. We're also going to be reducing some materials. For the AV, that's mostly our recorded books. We're going to keep our most popular genres that people want, which basically is mysteries, and a couple other things. And hopefully our total decrease is right at about 5% of our budget.
Any questions from council? No. Thank you very much for that information.
You're welcome.
Honorable Mayor, Council, good evening.
Good evening to you.
Public, good to see everybody here. We have a significant presentation for you, just in the amount of cuts that the police department is looking at making. You can see we requested to freeze the commander position that's currently open and 2 vacant officer positions. In addition to that, we are looking at the layoff of all of our part-time and temporary people, which includes 1 records clerk and a part-time dispatcher, in addition to our graffiti abatement worker and the police department maintenance worker. The other line items I won't go through specifically, but basically I have gone through and taken this year's actual usage, prior year's projections, and made the best case estimate for the lowest amount that I think I could get by with in the year without having to come back to you and ask for more money, which is not something I would want to do. Could you go to the next slide? And this continues some of our reductions, and we do have a few assumptions for some increases. Fuel, number 1, and that's a very conservative, I think, fuel increase. Hopefully, if they can keep the gas price under about $4.50 a gallon, we may be okay at that number. Our communications costs are going up slightly, and our cleaning services was inappropriately allocated last year, so we're bringing that up to the actual numbers under the contract. Our total decrease is going to be $597,000 or so. 2 of the most significant issues that we will face, irrespective of the sworn positions, the loss of the top end command staff is going to something that we can handle, but it'll cause a little bit of struggle in the station, and the sworn positions, which decreases some of our enforcement on the streets. But the loss of the maintenance worker at the police department, I know that sounds like an odd one to pick, but his cost to me is about $20,000 a year, but he saves me about $50,000 in me having to hire out folks to fix things at the PD, and washing the vehicles, we would have to recontract that, and those kinds of issues. The graffiti abatement worker would be a tragic loss. Sam and our guy that's out there, they have done a tremendous job in keeping the city clean. So we'd have some impacts just generally in the public, and some impacts on the police department itself with those losses. But
Chief, you mentioned that position, the maintenance worker there. His cost is about $20,000, but you anticipate higher costs because of that absence, or the absence of that position. In that instance, why would you not keep him?
I was informed to place him on the list as potential reduction. It actually has to do with when we do layoffs or get rid of people, we have an MOU we need to follow, and in the MOU, all part-time and temporary personnel have to go first, because as you saw on the first page, one of the reductions is the elimination of our community services officer, and elimination of that position, and I have to get rid of all part-time and temporary personnel prior to looking at any sworn or full-time personnel, or non-sworn side, either one. So that's why he's on the list.
Thank you for clarifying that, Chief.
Chief, I have a question. On your ammunition costs and your marksmanship, can you explain to me what the ammunition cost relates to and what the marksmanship cost relates to?
The ammunition cost is the direct cost of me purchasing bullets for our weapons, both practice and what we carry on duty. The marksmanship cost is what we pay out when officers are required to qualify at the range, and if they're off duty, then they're paid overtime to qualify at the range. While they're on duty, they just do it during their shifts, and so it's actually a backfill. The reason I can reduce that is because of the way we restructured our shifts. Not as many officers actually need to put in for that overtime, so it's not a large reduction, but there was a slight savings seen there.
How do you go about purchasing your ammunition, Chief?
Well, we've gone out to bid a couple of times, and we go through the lowest place we can get it through. We've used local folks and had some luck with them, but we just find the cheapest ammunition, with the exception of our duty ammunition. Our duty ammunition is purchased typically through the same company, but it's brand name specific ammunition.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Any other
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Council, members of the community, Karen Morgan, Parks and Recreation. The department has a $1.6 million budget, a 5% cut, just short of $1.6 million budget. A 5% cut is approximately $78,000. In order to achieve that, 80% of almost all of our budgets are staff, personnel. So as you see, they're affected by every department. Staff has recommended the following: the elimination of one full-time employee, that's the senior center coordinator, the elimination of the prison crew, and the elimination of the ARC Industries, 2 contracts that we have for maintenance of our parks. Also, reduction in recreation operating supplies of $5,000. We would be increasing temporary salaries to bring in part-time staff to fill the vacancy created by ARC Industries. This would also, it would save us some money in the long run, but we would still need some kind of staff to provide that service. It would also provide for $25,000 for temporary salaries in the senior center and reducing our cost there well over $30,000. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Any questions?
No, I don't, not yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members, Gordon Gase, Planning Director. As you can see, that we do have a net total increase, that mostly being obviously for the half of the salaries that were previously funded by the redevelopment. In terms of the supplies, materials, services, there's a few that are going up, but most are going down. The net is actually a 20% reduction on that side. Like I said, the CRA is what's going to, really hurt, since the half the salaries for, each of us were funded by that. The loss of the admin secretary position, just required to keep, accurate records and timely distribution of documents per the state planning and zoning laws would, obviously have a negative effect on record keeping and timely application processing. So these applications for new projects, may be processed slower and, could eventually develop somewhat of a backlog, what I'd be afraid of. Also, the maintenance of state mandated deadlines for required plans and reports that we have, a lot of these have to be in place when you apply for certain grants and other outside funding. So that can have an impact also. Any questions?
Any questions for our planning director?
Thank you, Gordon.
No, actually, I think, can you tell me what the rent is for?
It's the copier. It's because, we're running the copier, and it's kind of expensive because we make a lot of copies. We have, the two different type of agendas that we send out per month. A lot of them also are maps, and they're color copies, so they cost a little bit more, but they're a lot easier to read. I think that's worth the cost.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As I'm sure you can see from the presentations made by staff, this hasn't been an easy exercise to undertake. And before we close on the items we want to share with you today, I want to also make note that we did lose our economic development coordinator earlier this year. And that individual was 50% carried by the general fund and 50% by the redevelopment agency. So I wanted to note that that savings has been realized from last year to this year. We are also placing for your consideration a potential increase in the technical services line item, and this would be to account for the video documentation of meetings so that we can increase transparency and access to the public. So we're hoping to hear back from you on whether or not that is something you'd like built into the budget. Overall, with these additional considerations, we've got another decrease of approximately $44,000. As mentioned to you at the beginning of our presentation this evening, we have zeroed out all capital fund items out of the general fund budget, but we have identified through staff 3 particular projects for your consideration. The first is what has been articulated as a must-replace set of needs in Parks and Rec, and that is for a truck and a lawnmower. And the second item is in our library. It is a book alarm system. We actually don't have any security on our current inventory of books. And when the library went through their exercise of reducing costs, their hope was to use development impact fees for a portion of their line items, which they have substituted in. But then I opted after the exercise to actually zero out capital budget requests. So this item is on this page because I want to make sure that it comes forward to you, and I want you also to be aware that it was reduced in the budgets with the anticipation that the resources would still be secured to deliver the project. The last item that's shown is a local area network, which is basically connecting all of these islands that we have as departments, allowing for increased efficiency for online access, a lot more shared electronic file opportunities, shared printer resources, etc. And our intention and hope would be to deliver this project in the next fiscal year, matching funds from some resources that are available from asset forfeiture. So this is a portion of an anticipated cost of $120,000, with $70,000 being a proposed capital expense to the general fund. I wanted to also just provide a quick glimpse of a number of obligations that we have historically had on the books, and what's built into the expenditures is that these would continue, those that had line items, but I also want to point out a number of them were RDA items. So the first is the Imperial Valley Foreign Trade Zone at an annual cost of about $1,800. The Enterprise Zone at $60,000 as a contract obligation. The Chamber of Commerce contract, which last year became the figure of $35,000. Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation at $5,000. The Film Commission at $9,000. Membership in the National League of Cities, and I pulled that out only because I thought you might want to weigh whether or not the city's been active at the national level and whether we're getting a bang for the buck on that front. We also are members of the California League of Cities, but all of our local electeds are pretty active participants. The lobbyist services were terminated when RDA went away. That was an RDA-funded activity. If you wish to bring it back, it's another cost we need to build back into the model. And then wanted to just generally refer to special events, whether they're sponsorships, tables at events. One that came up that wasn't budgeted in last year since I've been here, but has been a constant through the years, has been assisting with the gas company's barbecue on the bluff. Those kinds of expenses. Are these special events that you wish to name and identify so that we can confine the set of expenses that are allowed, or do you want to create a pot that once it's expended, it's gone and there aren't any more resources? So those are there for your consideration. And just so you know, I did make active contact with all of the local entities to make them aware that the subject would be raised in this venue tonight, and they were welcome to come and be present and offer comment. So here's a quick bird's eye view of what all these changes represent. In the end, we propose with all of the various departments approximately $740,000 in reductions. And as noted in a number of the department level presentations, many of our expenses are in the area of compensation. It's the nature of the expenses we carry as a public agency. So you see that compensation really does carry a big portion of the cuts, and unfortunately the resulting proposed staff reductions. We've also done, I think a really decent job of combing through line items, and the staff is to be commended for taking the task to heart. It wasn't a pleasant one, and trying to find where we can opportunities to share or to reduce or combine resources. And just to recap, in one place, we do have quite a few frozen vacant positions. A number of these are RDA related. All of those below, at Fire Marshal and below, were all those that had been 50% carried by the RDA. So we're proposing to continue freezing those vacant positions, as well as those above it. So the commander, 2 police officers, accounting assistant, and a part-time library page. We are also proposing for layoff a number of positions that will be a loss to the city, without a doubt. And those are clearly articulated in the summary here on the slide. So what we're hoping to do is get some feedback from you, and our intention is to have a revised budget that we can take to you for action at the second meeting in May, which is the historical meeting at which you consider the item. You would have a traditional format. The goal for this was for it to be more illustrative than the worksheets, although we're happy to share the worksheets with you so you can see by department where the general fund stands. So this is only the picture for the general fund. We have numerous other funds, but because it is the fund that has the greatest sensitivity, we have opted to have it be the sole subject of this workshop. So we're also hoping to hear from you whether you want a subsequent workshop set up for all the other funds, or if you want it in a regularly scheduled council meeting. And with that, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to address them.
I had a question. I didn't notice that our city council budget was showing any cuts. I'm assuming that it's mostly general fund, so I think I would like to see us go over that budget and look and see where we can cut some of our costs. It's not, the budget is primarily salaries, I think, and benefits for the council members, but there is about $30,000, I believe, in that budget that's for other items, and I would like to see us also cut those items. I mean, whatever, give us a range or give us a scenario, maybe discuss that with us, and we'll come up with some.
I'd be happy to offer some suggestions on that front. I thought it presumptuous to present a set of cuts for your specific budget. One item that was internally reviewed that you might consider, we don't need an answer today, is the way the council budget is set up is as though each one of you has a set aside travel and training, and one suggestion is that we just combine it into a pot, because individual council members don't typically use their entire amount. So instead reduce the resource overall and have it be a shared pot as opposed to one that runs with individual names.
What I would like to see, though, is if we're going to record the council meetings, then I'd like to at least see us offset that by cuts to our budget to make up for that difference, rather than add that as an additional cost to the budget. At least that's my feeling. I'm not going to speak for the whole council, and I don't know how they feel about that, but that's about, I believe you were raising.
And just the line item has a lesser decrease than the actual cost. The actual cost of the video documentation, assuming two two regularly scheduled meetings per month that are no greater than 2 hours, it's $9,600 a year. So if you look at the way that line item is shown, it's just a difference in the technical services budget that has not been utilized in the prior year. So the increase is lesser than the actual cost.
Okay, but I still would like to see possibly cuts there that would offset that, and maybe even more than that. I mean, I'd just like to see that.
Questions?
Well, go ahead. Let me go.
I just had some concerns. Just came from and I apologize for being here late. Just came from another board meeting that unfortunately we had to do some layoffs, and I hate that. You all know in the past I was also one of those victims that got affected in a layoff, but thank God I'm back on board. I noticed going through the book, some of the line items, we pay approximately $50,000 on buyback, sick buyback.
Sick leave buyback.
Yeah, right. And maybe perhaps, I don't know how the employees feel, but at this point in time, I think that I would rather eliminate that than being layoff. I know $50,000 is not a lot, but perhaps we can. Well, it's actually what I got is $48,589. I'm just throwing that. Maybe there's more. Hope there's more, and hopefully employees will be better off not taking that. You know, God forbid one of you gets in an accident or sick, and you're going to need more than a month, and you don't have no sick time. Anyway, maybe perhaps we can use that line item and perhaps save or patch wherever we can and avoid laying out some staff, one of those 6 potential cutbacks. And there's some other items that perhaps we can eliminate. And, you know, I can't speak on behalf of the employees, but I'm pretty sure you would rather cut that than being unemployed.
So some of our challenge, Councilmember Miranda, is there are elements of the benefits that are offered to our employees that are negotiated items. And the sick leave buyback does require a meet and confer with the bargaining units. So it's not something that management has the opportunity to simply change. But it is an item, if it's something that you wish to have incorporated into our next round of negotiations, we do have a number of discussions on the horizon.
Well, and this is my own prerogative, you know, it doesn't give us much choices, you know, and I don't want to make a decision tonight or tomorrow that, okay, we're going to lay off other 6 or 7 individuals in order to continue when we can cut some corners here and there. But for those that are in a union, perhaps, you know, you might look it over and make that decision. Because it's going to affect, believe me, it's going to affect if we don't take action. Well, we're not going to take action tonight, but if we don't take action soon, we can't wait until the end of the day, 2 or 3 years, when we won't have the rest of the money. So, I don't know, maybe I just feel touched because we had to lay off some 17 employees on the last meeting that I had, but I hope we don't have to do that here.
Assuming we continued as we are without any layoffs, and we continue to tap into the general fund reserve, that dollar figure is approximately 1.2,
1.1, I think, is where, and we're very rough at this point, but.
And so we need to make up that. And then in addition to that, we have the funds that are coming in through the user utility tax, which is about nearly $2 million.
Correct.
So really we're having to make up about $3 million over the next 5 years in order to be off of that tax and be able to remain self-sufficient with the revenue that we're bringing in. So, you know, significant cuts are obviously, it's inevitable that they take place, but I would agree, you know, we need to consider all options at this point. This is just a workshop. It's not an action meeting. We're not taking action on any item here tonight, but I know that staff has gone over their individual budgets and proposed these reductions or changes to their budget and help them bridge that gap, and I appreciate their efforts there. So. That's my comment. Question from
This statement or question. I went over the entire finance department revenue and expenditure report for March. I have some questions. I don't think this is necessarily the venue for those questions, but I have a lot of questions about, we have unusual expenses that occur that are not budgeted. We have a lot of ongoing expenses that are somewhat, for me to look at, are difficult to decipher based upon the information that I receive in this. So I'm thinking that I might request a workshop so that we could go over this and take a look at some of this, the things that I've noted in here that I have questions about. I don't think this is the venue for that, but I think it might afford us an opportunity to make other cuts that might not necessarily be related to the ones you have listed in your report here. And so I would just like to go over it. I know there are many costs that are certainly justifiable, but I also see a lot of unusual costs and many things that are not budgeted, and also in the budget I see costs that were not originally budgeted, but we've had to come up with money for. I know some of those are emergency repairs. I know some of those are emergency issues, increases in certain things that we run into on a yearly basis, and a budget's a living document. But I also think that if we look at it, we may be able to make some additional cuts in other areas that might not require some of these cuts, or we might be able to make additional cuts in order to get more out of the usage, to get less usage of our reserves. And that's what I would like to see us do. But I think that's going to require a whole separate meeting simply because of the detail of this budget.
Each of you are welcome at any time to come in and do one-on-one meetings with the finance department. Our finance director is absolutely available to pull back up on any expenses. If you wish to have that discussion occur or review occur in a public meeting, happy to accommodate it if it's the wishes of the council.
Okay.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. I do want to thank staff for taking the time and working with our city manager to take a look at some of these tough decisions we need to make. But as you guys always know, this is the first go at this, and I think we need to really take a good hard look at this. And as everyone has said, I'm against layoffs until we make all the other adjustments that we have to make before we get to that point. There's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of adjustments that we can make in this budget before we start laying people off. And I'm not saying it's not going to come down to that. We all as professionals has faced this decision, but I think we do need to do all the extra work that we can and all the extra little cuts other than leaving people unemployed. But I do want to thank staff and everybody for the hard work and my colleagues and council for taking people's livelihood and their lives in consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Gillett?
Well, this is very sombering. We are in a position where we've put ourselves in it. We've relied on these reserves for long enough. I don't like to see these positions. I know the names behind them. We're going to have a few more meetings because the presentation that's presented, I appreciate the effort, but I need to have more dialogue with those that are directly involved for each department, hearing their concerns about the effect on service. The overview is good. I appreciate the direction, but I need to hear specifically that impact of that position on the city, and then be able to weigh how we move forward from that. So I would suggest that we have a couple more meetings before the second meeting of May, so that we can delve in deeper to what the impact is on the citizens in the community.
Good point. Are there any questions from the public or from anybody in attendance here for the council, or any comment that you would like to make?
Come up to the mic.
My name's Lupi Navarro, and I live at 671 South 18th Street. I've been looking at this, and I have to agree the city is in dire need of money, I guess. On this pie that they had at the beginning, I have a couple questions there, just for my information. What is interfund transfers?
We have our finance director right behind you. She's going to answer that question for everyone.
The interfund transfers are actually based on the city's cost allocation plan. And what they are, they derive from transfers that are actually admin cost allocation, an engineering cost allocation, and the revenues for utilities allocation. And what it is comprised of all the overall city's expenditures, and then a percentage is derived, and then it's allocated to the general fund. So they come pretty much from streets. For the engineering allocation, allocations are received from the streets, which is gas tax, Measure D, water and wastewater, and the airport. Those contribute to the engineering revenues. For the admin cost allocation, it comes from various components, which involves law enforcement, which is the asset forfeiture fund, our special law enforcement funds, water, wastewater, airport, dial-a-ride. That's for the admin. It's for the overall processing for the central services that for the administering those programs. And the utilities allocation is from water, wastewater, and the airport. And what that is just a set percentage from the cost allocation plan that's from sales only, water sales, wastewater sales, and revenue generated from the airport for hangar leases, ground leases, and so forth. And those are the monies that's the total amount transferred to the general fund.
Thank you. One more section.
Okay.
Sales tax and use taxes, that's 14% of the pie.
We get those monthly.
And use taxes, and not sales tax, but use taxes, like the motel occupancy tax?
No, that's your transient lodging, which you'll see here
Motels?
down, it's only 2%.
Oh, okay.
That's separate.
Okay. All right, thank you. One more question if I may.
Sure.
We are all aware that the bypass will be finished this year, and has the city done a study or interviewed other businesses that are downtown right now to what effect it's going to have on them, because it's going to redirect traffic away from Brawley, and it might hurt or make their business better, whatever, but has the city done anything and considered that, how it might affect their revenue for the fiscal year and all that?
There has been a downtown study. It actually won some awards. There is a plan for the downtown, but it just comes down to dollars. And so obviously funding is an issue not only for the city but for small business owners as well. Their view, at least according to that study, was that there could be improvements to the downtown area, and with a reduction in truck traffic that may improve downtown business, but it's yet to be seen. Is there any other comment?
No.
Thank you, Lupi.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I just wanted to say something. As an employee and as a resident, first of all, as an employee, I appreciate the fact that you guys weren't quick to jump the gun. Some of you guys said that before we did layoffs, before we went that route, that you guys would consider any other cutbacks in other areas. And my mom always taught us something, that you always lead by example. And I appreciate the fact that, Mr. Couchman, you said that there was other areas in council budget that could be cut. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are not only looking to cut employees, employee benefits, things that affect just the employee, that you guys are willing to look at everything. And I would ask that if there are layoffs, you guys turn around and hire temporary workers, that you would give some of these people that you're laying off an opportunity to come back, and even if it's at a lower pace, a lower pay scale, but for them to have that opportunity to be able to come back and fill those positions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Anna.
And this is, like we said earlier, it is a workshop. We're just getting information, feedback from everybody. This is the first time we've run through this presentation with city staff, and it's not by any means set in stone. So I know sometimes people see figures and a plan and they think this is the end of it and this is the end all, but it's not. It's something that, it's a work in progress. We've decided to have these workshops for this very reason, to get input from everybody. So it's important. We all know that we're eating up at our reserves, and obviously it necessitates some change in order to make some improvements there, but this is by no means the final result. So I appreciate everyone's comment. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council, citizens of Brawley, especially the employees that are here tonight, I was at the last meeting, and I found something very similar to this meeting. By the way, I'm a resident of Brawley. I run the Imperial Valley Economic Development Corporation and serve on several committees here in the city of Brawley and throughout the Imperial County and the state of California. This discussion is being had throughout the state. I think a lot of people are in really tough shape, and we're trying to figure out ways to do that. I really commend the management of the city of Brawley and the staff and their departments for stepping up to the plate and trying to do the best they can to make these reductions. One thing that I haven't seen, though, that is very similar to the last meeting is no one's really talking about revenue. And I'm in the business of revenue. I don't look at what things cost. I look at how I can bring money in to pay for things. And I think that that's something that needs to be looked at this city as far as ordinance goes, fees that are charged, et cetera. You don't want to price yourself out of the market, but I know there's a lot of things that we could probably find in the city that we're not charging enough for, and we're giving a lot of things away. As an example, TOT tax. You know, if we look throughout the county, every city has a different TOT tax. Who pays for the TOT tax? We don't. It's people that visit this county. We should look at a uniform TOT tax where one city doesn't compete for the other, and guess what? They don't. Because no one ever sees that tax when they pay it until after they've paid the bill. I think it could be fair, and when we look at other cities that you wouldn't think would need a TOT tax, such as New York or San Francisco or Los Angeles, charge 18%, and what are we charging? 2. And I think if you were to double that TOT, or not double it, but if you're looking at a slight increase, would offset a lot of costs. Enterprise zone vouchering. I can't remember what we charge, but when it was brought up that we should charge more, then I was told not only here in the city of Brawley, but also in Calexico, that we're a poor community. So we can't pay that much for this vouchering. Well, guess what? If an employer is making $35,000 in a tax credit per employee, I think we can charge the maximum amount, which, by the way, throughout the state is about $85 to $100. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're about 40. The enterprise zone could actually become or closer to self-sufficiency. I think that's a great opportunity. The fire and police, another example. I think that if we look at what the fire and police are charging, you know, I'm really grateful when they come by my house and check it when there's alarm goes off. But I think citywide we need to look at what that cost is for sending the police, you know, for an alarm that goes off, especially when it's a false alarm. Fire department, the same thing. You know, these people work very hard for what they do, and it's very frustrating when they waste their time. But guess what? That one time when you think it's a waste of time and you need them and they're not there because we can't afford it, we're all going to suffer and we're going to pay. Parks and Rec is another thing. It's, you know, we've got great parks here. We've got great people that work for the Parks and Rec. But, you know, these days of you know, the free lunch is over. And it really frustrates me when I go to Cattle Call Park. I'm a member of the Rotary Club, and we spend from 7 o'clock to noon cleaning up the park. And there's people there, and believe me, it's well used. And people come down there, they wait all morning so they can reserve a spot. And you look around, and the people aren't even from Brawley. They're using it in many cases. So we're not monitoring that. We're providing a great service, not only in the city of Brawley, the community, even Mexicali. And yet we're struggling to keep these parks in good shape as they are. And so we really need to consider those types of activities. I think we need to look more at public-private partnerships. And I want to switch that around, private-public partnerships. Team California used to have a $4 million budget. Now our budget is less than $500,000, and $40,000 comes from the government. It's now a private-public partnership. IVDC, same situation. Less than 10% of our budget comes from the public. It comes from private sector. We've done a good job going out, raising money, and being able to leverage the resources for this city, the cities in this community, to do a marketing effort county-wide, regional-wide, that I think we've seen some benefits of. And we saw this as an example the projects that have passed in the billions and billions of dollars. And we're going to start seeing those benefits. The city of Brawley is seeing those benefits in the businesses that have opened offices here to take advantage of these ancillary businesses. So I think we need to look at what those revenue opportunities are. We can't price ourselves out of the market. One of the things about the Imperial Valley, about Brawley, is people come here because it is less expensive, but we can't continue to operate below what it costs to do business. And so we need to firm that up. We need to think more about revenue. We need to think more about partnerships. If it means another city to write grants together to have a better opportunity to compete, we need to look at that also. So I think these are great opportunities to look at. I'd be glad to discuss that with you in the future. I've seen other communities do it, and I think there's a great opportunity in here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your comments.
Thank you, Tim.
Are there any other comments or questions from anyone here in attendance or from council? Any questions?
No,
Our city
I'm good.
manager, did you have any other comments?
It's extremely helpful to get feedback. We certainly appreciate it. I would respectfully request, if there is if it's a consensus of the council to move forward with scheduling additional workshops, that we get that clearer answer today. There isn't a whole lot of time between now and the end of May. So we would love to work with you on some dates that might make sense. If you'd like to go back to the format of going through worksheets, we're happy to do it.
I would like personally to meet with you and our finance director just for about an hour and go over things, and so I have a better understanding of those items. And then I likely will talk to the department heads and discuss with them what that level of impact is going to be. I think that'll work best for me, but I'm open, obviously, to a workshop as well. You had mentioned a workshop. Yeah.
Find a date? Okay.
Yeah, I would like to have workshops. I wanted to hear more specifically about the positions that are proposed, especially the full-time positions, and the effect it has in the operations. I can give you dates. You know, if we're just here for kind of a brief tonight, then we won't get into detail. But you know, I've been scribbling notes, and I've got stuff that I've already been reviewing. So I guess it'll be at the next meeting, and when we schedule that, then we can start getting into the different items. You know, be that what Mr. Couchman brought up, or our contributions to some of the organizations that we support, be that the administrative costs that we have. And what is that, Ruby, the administrative fee that we have for administering the enterprise funds? What does finance charge the water and wastewater fund? What's the percentage?
The percentage, actually, for utility alone, the utility revenues, that's 11%, and that's just consistent with the past practice of what historically that's been transferred from the enterprise zones. I mean, yes, for the enterprise fund, sorry. And then based on the cost allocation plan, with the revised numbers that we've been working with, the percentage is actually about 8%.
You mentioned past, that's a good question, but you mentioned past practice. Is that, in your opinion, is that an accurate figure to be using?
It's conservative. I did speak with the prior finance director in talking to the cost allocation plan, because this is what the city's been utilizing, and it varied. And the history with the percentage of 11%, he actually said it was at one point between 15 and 20%, because at one point they did go out, and with the utility side of it is because they went out and said, since we do our billing in-house, there we process it, we print it, we mail it, we do all of it. They did do a request for proposal at one time to see what would it cost to outsource, and it actually came back, it would probably be 30% of what we would receive in revenues to have that service. So what was developed is then into the cost allocation plan and a percentage. And at this point, in the last couple of years, it's been an average of 11%.
That's maybe something that we can look at.
In my history of working with indirect cost plans, et cetera, at the federal level, usually it's much higher than 8%. Usually it can run into the 20s and 30s. Maybe we don't want to do that, but I think maybe we're a little bit too conservative there with the 8%.
Right, and I did discuss that. Me and the city manager have been discussing this, and as we were putting this plan together, and and trying to see how. I mean, we looked at individual revenue items to see how we could adjust accordingly to make them more realistic, and we did discuss the percentage of the cost allocation plan, but we wanted to be conservative as well, and we want to leave. Still maintain our enterprise funds for their operations as well. Right. So that is something that we can still review.
It is a give and take. But,
correct.
But if it's not general fund and you need money in the general fund, sometimes you've got to look at that. And maybe it's only 2 or 3%, but it could make a pretty big difference. It could mean one position. It could be a variety of different things that could be added to.
Right, and just to give you a recap, in talking to the prior finance director, he also discussed it at one point. There was discretion, there was actual direction given based on the discretion of city council as far as if they thought that was a need at that time to increase the percentage of that allocation.
Thank you, Ruby. I remember that.
That's a good question. That was a good question.
Anything else?
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, I think we probably should maybe look at the calendars and decide when we're going to meet again to give us a couple of days to go over the information that we've received, because I can tell you I'm not real comfortable with some of what I received tonight. So I want to have the opportunity to take a look at it, and then we can meet again.
I have a question. On the transient occupancy tax, is that required to go before a ballot, or can we raise that from the council side?
I do not believe it's subject to a ballot change. One item of note, we've had, I think, is it 1999, if I remember correctly? We have not performed an audit of the TOT. We do plan on doing one in the next fiscal year. That's proposed as one of the activities.
I do know that I was approached by one of the leading motels in town, and they indicated that while they don't want a large increase, they would be willing to go along with a small increase. And so it's just something to consider, because they're looking at other cities within the valley, and some of them are higher than ours. And so what they looked at was, they said, that they might be willing to do that. Since we've got a new motel coming into town, this might be the proper time to look at that, at least look at it. I mean, I don't know how much money it would bring in. I don't know if it's a large increase in revenue, but it's something to look at.
I think it's a great suggestion, but we might be slightly vulnerable prior to the audit being conducted, since we have not conducted an audit of that fund.
Right.
That's fine. I mean, maybe that needs to be done first, but then I think we need to move along with that process.
Because I think our TOT is 2% or something.
It's approximately $250,000 a year. Let me see. I think yes, 2%.
And the average is 8%?
Oh, no.
9?
2% of the general fund is the reference that I'm making, and the actual portion assigned.
What's the tax rate?
I can't remember. It's between 7% and 8%.
Right.
Mm-hmm. What's the average TOT with some of the other cities?
We can go through and perform an analysis of you, like for Calexico, El Centro. Imperial's getting a hotel. I don't know if they've made an adjustment.
That would be something that we could talk about in another meeting. I think the meeting that Mr. Kelly indicated.
I want to be sure that I do share one point with you. Your feedback is great to receive. I should also note that we always have the option to spend from the reserve, and that's not, I felt my task and the task that I assign to department heads that report to me is that the wish is for a balanced budget. But if folks aren't ready to go there, we're ready to work with you on it. So I want to be sure we're open to that solution. But given where we were with the general fund reserve preservation policy and discussions of our past practice of having that gap unaddressed, it was part of the purpose behind this exercise.
So, no reflection on you, Miss City Manager. it is that these are decisions that have ramifications. And the overall focus is to get to a neutral point and not be on our reserves, but we need to be very cautious. And those decisions on these sheets of paper, they need to be hashed out individually, I believe, as they impact people that some of us know, and they also impact those that we love in the city. So it just means not any reflection. This is a very, very good presentation that's showing us the path to getting to neutral, but we have to get into every single one of these things. Mm-hmm. There may be some other opportunities that we haven't. I don't know, maybe one of these, the brain trust up here is going to be able to come up with the magic solution, and there will be something that you guys haven't thought of.
I have to
Probably
share, I had
not,
a money tree was actually delivered to my office yesterday. It had one real bill, $1 bill on it, and a bunch of fake ones, unfortunately. But there's always hope, yes.
Are there any other questions or comments? If no other questions and comments, we would like to thank you all for participating, for coming out. We've set a date for the next meeting, workshop meeting. Is there a proposed date?
Well, that's our regular meeting.
Yeah, that's our regular
meeting. We do have an item tentatively scheduled for Tuesday that's simply an update on the outcome of this. If you want me to present dates at that point, it might be a little bit easier, and then I can float possibilities with you individually.
We're still going to need 72 hours after that, though.
Right.
Why don't
Oh,
we just
because
go
you-
for Thursday of next week?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
If there's any conflict with anyone.
I don't have my calendar here, and I think you're going to have to give us some options.
But you, are the wishes of the council that I try to find a night next week as opposed to a day, or do you want a day? Do you want day options?
No, I don't know my calendar. I don't have my
night.
Night? Okay. So it would have to be after Tuesday because of posting. So what I'll do is send either Wednesday or Thursday night to you guys with a 6 o'clock start time. And you can vote or tell me what you...
Wednesday is a problem for me.
Okay, so that only leaves Thursday or Friday?
Why don't we sleep on it and then we...
Why don't you give us some options?
Okay.
By internet or something so that we can...
Happy
by
to.
email so that we can... Yeah, because we're going to have some scheduling conflicts.
We could do a Saturday workshop if you wanted. It's a possibility.
May the 8th has been proposed. That's a Tuesday.
I'm sorry, May...
May the 8th has been proposed. Would that work? It's an in-between.
Oh, the Tuesday in between?
May
8th. That might work.
Would that work? Okay. I think that works for us. We'll make it May the 8th at 6:15 again.
Okay.
At the council chambers.
We could do that.
Again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out here and helping with this workshop. It's important that we get your feedback, and we've gotten some good information from all of you. So thank you. And if you have any concerns that you didn't share with us here today, feel free to give me a call or the other council members and talk to us one-on-one. I know sometimes it's difficult to come up before everyone and raise your concerns. So, pardon me? Yeah, no, any suggestions obviously are welcome, whether they're through email or phone call or whatever it is. So, again, thank you very much for all your effort.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Good night.